atypical SC, and shields, of course, being wonky as shields. Now, let's get started. Before the sound barrage of doom, let's get this started with the information sheets, because I've already attempted this recording once. Let's put it all just be straight with you. I learned I need to tweak the audio more than I thought. Let's start off with the first build info. Why must you be there? So I don't have that on my preview worlds. This is the NG issue that some of you may have noticed in the original release. I'm still building that to fix it. It will not affect your save games in any negative way. It'll fix itself when I apply the new changes. So that is getting patched in all Serpent Arms. Making NGs is complicated, and I'm working on a new method, because I have to test it through the most absurd methods imaginable. So don't worry, that's getting fixed. Now this weird turret is the ER Diablo. Actually, not the U. My character is still in a cockpit. I gave him orders to not be. The bugger. I've remapped this. Those who have not seen Serpent Arms' release, has its own tab, new generalized icons that more match vanilla and more fit in, rather than looking like abominations. Now, this is heavy metal, a little bit of a teaser. Now, if you pause this video, you can get a lot more information of each of these, which is why I'm doing this. Some of these are incomplete, will not be the finest product. Others will have probably their names fixed up. And as you can tell, not all of them have icons yet, but I do have a backup icon for that case. If you see an icon like this, you're probably not supposed to. Now, let's start with the Diablo, which to me is the ER2 RF. But you know, that's literally a product name at this point. So if I stutter into that, you'll know what gun it is. Now, this turret was originally simply just 2 barrels of paint. It's been redesigned from the ground up, literally, into a much fancier model. It now has a venting animation for when it overheats, which also takes a while, as with all new toys, custom terminals referencing Serpent Arms itself, relatively nonchalant plating. The weapon system itself has recoil, which is actually animated in this dev build. Not all of them are. This one is. This is the micro launcher. Fires independently tracking missiles, letting this thing handle multiple roles. Micro missiles are manufactured on the spot for free. This gives you a decent backup option should you run out of, well, the rounds and during its overheat cycles. Now, a change that many probably noticed in Serpent Arms, maybe not, is I've completely overhauled how these weapons work in general. Let's start with reload times. My mod was originally notorious for having long reloads. That has been resolved. Most of them past select missiles are back down to around below 30 seconds. This allows you to get quick in the action, and typically I let the overheat do it, and overheat takes several minutes typically to arrive. And it's still quite relatively quick. This lets you have ample time to switch out your weapon systems, ample time to respond, which is the main reason I had it in the first place, and ample reason to be punished for picking the wrong ammo type and have the reload cycle, but not too punishing. So you no longer have to worry about taking a minute to reload every gun. This is a point defense system. It's quite nice. It spins. You might notice I have new emissives all over the place. I like emissives. This weapon is something you haven't seen and don't actually have an analog on the AMS from earlier. This is a particle lance. This is the particle lance technology being introduced in heavy metal. This is an anti-shield kinetic beam weapon. Its primary purpose is to take out enemy shields. It is a very long fire duration and a relatively long period of inactivity between firing from heat. However, it knocks down shields really quickly. However, it also sucks greatly at taking out armor, to the point where it's hilarious if you try to take out a target with this weapon. If the enemy has heavy armor, this weapon is effectively useless. It is quite literally very specialized in its role. But don't worry if you don't particularly like that. I'll get to those in a moment. You can always use, of course, missile solutions, much like Serpent Arms' main release. This thing, the hammer, related to the twine, provides a Serpent Arms solution to wanting a missile turret. This thing is inaccurate, but fires, I believe it's 3 kilometer long range missiles. They're inaccurate, but fast and devastating. They have a boost against shields and are relatively decent against armor as well. These are the anti-shield options if you're trying to hit something slow or large. Fast targets like fighters will laugh at these missiles. They do the job, however, quite well, and they recover quite well as well. Now, here, this is a light autocannon Gauss. Heavy Metal introduces the first of the autocannon type of Gauss weapons. Originally was only the Diablo. The rebuilder and remaster has introduced them as plentiful. This is the smallest available unit. It is still a 3x, 3x, 3x1. Don't be deceived. It has a small collision volume, however, much like the vanilla 1x, 1x Gatling. Exactly like it, in fact. It's small, compact, in collision, but not placement area. These light little gases are quite useful and fire a barrage of shells. Easy, affordable, useful. This is the remodel of the Gauss 2C, also known as the CSIS for normally people who haven't seen like internal code names. Apologies. This thing has been remastered into a actual Gauss autocannon rather than just another double-barreled twin Gauss. This does, of course, mean that it's slightly different from the original. It adds a little bit more flair. This also means that the Gauss 1 actually still has some uses, as no Gauss autocannon has shield-penetrating rounds by default. They're explosive rounds instead, similar to standard autocannons or cannon weapons in general. They do have, however, flexible shell counts, which does include shield-piercing ammunition options, but those options are less interesting and more varied. This is the remodeled and dev prototype, because it's not finished, of the Gauss ER2C. It has a laser AMS on the top, which is quite effective when it's active, since it has a brief inactivity period after each cycle. It is 3 independently tracking and firing barrels, letting you get that lovely broadside, targeting 3 different targets. And, of course, it's heavily armored. This is the shield penetration weapon of choice, and is quite large, expensive to fire, but glorious. Now, once the research has been done, I typically utilize the Diablo instead as a primary armament, but that's just for taste. The ER Gauss still has a 7 kilometer range, much like the smaller ER1, also known as the Reaper. Well, these still have a 5 kilometer range. They're quite nice. Now, these systems are extensively new. Over here, of course, we have the other ship, which is the same ship basically, but different armaments. Primarily it has, particle lances and more missiles. Very little else. It also has a laser AMS system. Expensive, but effective. Short activity period. Quite effective. Now, what you're all here to see, I'd imagine from you, would be anything if I didn't actually showcase the firing. Blessed be those who have ear protection. Particle lance in particular is notorious at this point. It is the purple. Red is the missiles from the hammer. Green is all varied types of Gauss. Always quite a show. The laser AMS is here. are incredibly rapid and essentially activate for a brief split second. That's not because they don't operate for long periods. The R2 AMS's units are actually long-lasting. It is simply because there isn't enough missiles on the field to make them work for it. It's because hammers are not exactly the most voluminous weapon, or swarm types. And of course, there's about 4 of those things on this ship. Those missiles get taken out relatively quickly and efficiently. All guns have heat indicators. You can see they're not functional on this version yet. They're not animated yet, but on things like this one, they are. If you activate all dual systems, it lets you see the white lights. That's the incomplete status lights for heating. I've been jumping between products quite a lot. I'm not dead. I'm just extremely busy having to do this on so many off hours. This takes forever when you can only work on it for brief moments. Apologies for the video. Now, this video will be going onto YouTube, yes, and it will be listed properly. There's a bit of luck in the show right now. This battle is also this test firing is also using my Serpent Arms vanilla replacer, so the armor is about stronger than normal. This is also why it's taking forever. These rounds are not weak, but they're not too strong. But against the heavy armor that these ships are entirely made out of, these fights could take a while, and due to poor ship design on my part, the engines of these ships die relatively quickly, so they drift apart rather than being splintered in two. Given these are all relatively moderate to large caliber, upper end, lower end, small caliber, none of these super weapons, so don't expect a ship to be cut in half by them within the first volley. So, very bad. And yes, the audio of the weapons are being tweaked so that they sound better, and also are not as ear-destroying or just obnoxious. Didn't worry about that. The ERs are a little bit more once in a while barrage fire, while the Diablos are quite consistent in their barrage timings. The sheer volume is from the glorious AMS units. The beams going up in random directions are the laser AMS units. And soon I'll have time to play the particle editor, which will make editing and creating new particles a lot simpler. I had to do these particles before it existed, due to bad timing on my part. I noticed impact effects have their own custom particle based on what is hitting. Goss has that radius shockwave indicating what it is, while Auto Goss has an explosion which differs from missiles. Former at the same time, but he was just have a wee bit of practice. And using different software, so. And yes, the particles mean that the requirements of this module's RAM did go up from my usual baseline. As does the complexity of the models improving. And don't worry, I have crap RAM. So I will be suffering just as much as anyone else on the lower end of the spectrum. Don't you worry. That's also why my test bricks are small. I wish that was a joke. But it's worth it. So worth it. Again, this is Serpent Arms Heavy Metal 1 in development build. Rebuild and remaster has been going quite well. This is not even half the weapons, unfortunately, done. I still have to do Serpent Metal Heavy Metal 2 at a later date, but Mrs. Term 1 requires the revamp and finishing as well. But Heavy Metal 1 will provide the mainstay optional expansions to the Serpent Arms series. As you can tell, it opens up with new weapon types. And lots of new systems to play with, while I try to make sure that's not too overwhelming. As remember, it's an add-on. You can have it separately from Serpent Arms, or you can have it and Serpent Arms. Work best together, but they are optional and independent. This is Greg, signing off. Have a lovely day, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just give you a list of Japan outwards. These ships always drift apart before they kill each other. Have a lovely day, ladies and gentlemen. Bang, bang.